I'll define myself as a curious person. So I always was curious about anything. I remember I studied telecommunication engineering, but by that time my sister was studying finances. I was like, can you give me all the papers about stock market? I want to see what these candles are, how they're going up or down. So I ended up actually doing a master degree in finances, and by the time I left my job in that time, I was just going to see if I can build algorithms and see if I can actually trade the market and all these things. And I remember it was 2017. I got a call from my brother, and it was like, you should check something called Ethereum, because I got a friend that made a bunch of money in a month. And I remember checking it. I was like, wow, you can make like in a week what I was trying to make with an algorithm, like in a 2 years spectrum. And I remember reading the white paper, a Bitcoin white paper. I was like, wow, this is impressive. So I basically left everything in that moment. It was October 2017. And I went deep into what crypto is. Obviously, my first two ICOs was a rug pull or rug pull. So I lost everything. I was like, okay, this is what it is. I just need to put more money then and try it out. But everything went down, and I was like, okay, it's okay. It's just a market. I know how market works. But I was just curious why there was so much money, so much capital in the space during that time. So I hate coding, but I was like, okay, I need to know what smart contract is. So I tried. I built, I'll say, 10% of what the first version of what Uniswap was. It was just a small DEX to see how someone can trade tokens in an open market. And I was like, wow, this is impressive. Like, you can create economies out of code. That's something that really clicked to me. So I did that project. It's not like I wanted to raise. I just went to speak with some guys from startups in Barcelona. I was in Barcelona in that time. As a personal story, I was born in Romania, but I grew up in Spain, so I'm more Spanish than Romanian actually. So I was there. I was like, hey, let's talk about my project. And basically, they offered me a job. So I've been there for like 2 years, something like that, in that startup. Started as a developer. They did realize that I'm not good at coding, so I was more tokenomic side, business side. But I was just, I know, amazed about I can just design new economies for new projects, and I know I want to build my career in this industry. So that was nice. So I did that until COVID hit, and then during COVID, I was kind of looking what to do next. And there was this thing called Gitcoin kernel, where you will go like we're 150 guys, like people inside, and you have a 3 months to build something. And if you are like the first one on demo day, you'll get investment. And it was crazy because I didn't want to apply first because basically it was like we just want to reach out developers. So I filled the form. I was like, I'm not a developer or a product guy, but I do understand everything technically. And they reached out to me. I got 2 interviews. I got in. I did that, and that's how I met people from Mingate, the first startup I was part of. And basically during that time was all the DeFi summers, social tokens. It was crazy. I was like, what's happening here? Like people are buying food coins. People are tokenizing like access to a Telegram group. So I was just curious about how we can build something around this. So in my mind, I was like, we're going to have like thousands of tokens, but people should do something with the tokens. And so like, let's build something focused on utility. So first thing we did is basically a kind of tokenized TikTok. That's how we won the, let's say, the hackathon, where you will watch like, the first 3 seconds of video, and then you have to buy the token. So it's a bonding curve. So that's how we actually started with token getting access. After like 2 weeks, we realized there's no one making videos in crypto. Like now people are making videos in crypto like up after 4 years. But during that time was like articles, some Notion page, some websites. So we try to actually tokenize access to any digital content, and that's how Mingy started. It was crazy because like 5 co-founders. I only met one of them in 3 years because he was all remote, all Discord, but still we managed to actually connect every single day to build the business. We worked with a lot of DAOs during that time. I remember we did a token getting experience for the Warriors, for the NBA team. I was like, what's happening here? And little I knew about marketing. My email, like I replied to them, was like, yeah, can you tweet about us? And that was it. But we started out, we did a lot of stuff. We got kind of on the spotlight. We raised money. And yeah, for 3 years, we just like iterated on different aspects of token getting, B2C, B2B, NFTs hit. So we switched to NFTs quickly. We tried to create our own NFTs with token getting inside. So basically you will buy an NFT and automatically that will unlock some content on the website. So we iterated a lot. I love experimenting. As I mentioned, I'm curious. So we try a lot of stuff. But at the end, like after 3 years, we saw like market is much bigger and no one wants actually to access things. It was more like when you will buy, if you remember NFTs, you will buy some art, you will ask like, okay, what's the utility? And everyone was like, well, the utility is art, right? That you don't need anything else. And we were on that side where, yeah, we need to access to something. But people didn't want to access something. They just want to speculate with NFTs. So yeah, we open source that. A lot of folks are still using that, so that's nice. But also in the meantime, I was starting something else in Spain. We did an NFT gallery specifically for Spanish-speaking artists, because art is a huge thing in Spain, but no one was doing anything digital. So I was like, okay, let's do it. We onboarded really important like kind of artists and also musicians with some music NFTs with them. We kind of expanded in different categories. We did in Polygon before Polygon was Polygon, so it was a while ago. I remember it was so easy. It was just like, hey, we built this. Here's a grant for you. So that was nice also, but also the market crashed, so we had to kind of pivot. But in the meantime, I was also like different kind of trying to find myself in different DAOs. I was super curious of friend with benefits. I was there in the Discord checking every day. So everything related to social tokens, I always love like how communities can create economies inside and how that can evolve into actually they did it in a company. And then after the NFT gallery experience, we did create another thing, which with most of the artists and content creators we spoke during that time, we had a thing which we only spoke, like we only onboarded people that had higher than 1 million following in social media. So at least they have like a big target so we can onboard them. So that's why we had a lot of sold outs, like 15 seconds. It was crazy actually. It was really nice. But they were like, okay, we want something else. We want, I don't know if it's a social platform, but we need to know who our followers are, because there's no way today if I stream on Twitch or I stream on YouTube, I know if David is there or who this David is or who's replying to me on Twitter. So we start to think around how we can actually create something that these content creators, brands, football teams can identify their loyal fans and can reward them. So that's what we started the second project in Spain. The first one was Mito, the Investigator. The second is Overg, which still works now. Where basically the slogan is any time you consume towards an IP, like a brand, content creator, football team, must be rewarded. So if you watch 4 hours of Twitch, we identify that, we give you a code, and with that code you can then play Fortnite with that gamer, for example. If you go to the stadium 3 times in a row, we give you a t-shirt. Well, not we, but the football team, the football club.
Right.
So I was always looking into how can we use crypto to onboard people and kind of reward them. I always hated the way of you have to get into crypto by buying tokens. You know, I always want like you have to, what if you can experience crypto by earning something, like not doing anything, like do your own stuff, like watch your YouTube videos, go to a stadium, support, like go to a concert, and then you'll get some crypto because you went there. and then that gives you access to a community, and you can earn more. So that's kind of we did. But I always was more focused on, I want to build something decentralized, and with my co-founders, they decided, okay, this is a big business to actually just sell data to brands. I was like, I'm against that. I don't want to be, well, Google is big words, but I don't want to be someone that sells data to brands. They should own the data already and use it to connect with the fans. So I step out of that, and I was just focusing since May last year just on what's happening in Farcasta. I've been in Farcasta for, I think last time I get in was September 2022. I was writing an article about Web3 Social, and I just reached out to Dan on Twitter. I was like, can I get in? Because I'm writing about Lens. I want to also know what Farcaster is. I do remember during that time, like nothing happened to feed. Like you will cast and then you wait 2 more hours, you refresh the feed and maybe there will be another cast. We didn't have images at that time. I remember the first time I could upload a picture, I was like, wow, that's okay, it's getting somewhere. But also I wasn't active during that time. I just wrote, I was checking things. Actually, when I was more focused on Farcast, it was a year after that, 2023, also like September, October, there was more activity. And I was just curious, like, okay, there's something here. And I was always focusing on decentralized technology, so and social part, obviously. So when I kind of step out of the last project, I was more like, okay, what should I do now? Should I build something new, or should I just wait and see what's happening? And I was more curious about what's happening on the space and actually create something. So I was just checking what's happening with Zora, Rodeo. I was just checking Dune dashboard basically every week and trying to see where on-chain social is going and kind of give my voice into that. I was trying to write an article every week during that time. And what clicked for me was actually kind of the market came back last year, September, October. And it really clicked for me when I saw what Clunker is, which is basically you can just post on social media and that post has a market cap. And I was like, this will be huge because that means everything that we post on social media now will have a market, will have a volume, and people want to check who's buying that, who's talking about it. So my mind was, there's something there that I might look into, because the same way we basically scroll on TikTok, the same way you scroll on social media and see what's getting trendy, we'll want to know what's getting trendy with on-chain content. And now creating on-chain content it's super easy. It's just one post and everything is happening. And you have a market already like created for you. And that's kind of started Checkr idea. And actually first name was Clunkcheck because I was only focusing on clunkers, and I wanted to see was more personal idea on how to see if these clunkers actually get attention in the feed. And why I was doing that, basically because everything we do on chain, most of the things we do on chain are based on social signals, like who bought that, who created that, who's talking about that. You check on interface, you speak on group chats in friends. So I was more like, can I actually get data from Farcaster, which is amazing. You can build on social and open social data and get all this data and see if I can actually get where attention is flowing into these coins. Again, I didn't know how to code. I learned everything like in the last 2 months or 3 months already. I was like, I will just use AI and see if I can get to something in a week. And then I realized I can actually build a platform. So I spent the last 3 months just working every single day, every single night, trying to understand the architecture, build what Checkr is today. And yeah, it was a really fun journey, and I'm enjoying it. Basically, what is it today? You can go into the platform and check where attention flows in most of the high volume tokens in Base, and see who's casting about that, what engagement do they get, if they hold tokens or not. This is something important because normally we just check like following count, but what's important is actually if these people are buying the token or not. Because if I'm only like farm engagement, it doesn't translate into market movement, and that's something I really want to track. And yeah, then I was just focused on different metrics, how to track attention, who's bringing down attention, tracking my share in the feed, and how all this engagement actually influence the market afterwards.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a great story. I appreciate you sharing it. I got a few different sort of questions to start off. Let me think where to go first. I guess first, I'm curious in hearing, like you sort of mentioned, you're following the Dune dashboards, you're seeing where on-chain social is going, what's happening with it. You're playing around with interface on, which is tracking who's buying and selling what. You're on Friends, which I'm not sure like where that's at right now. I dabbled with it very briefly, but my understanding was that was something somewhat like a little more similar to Checkr than interface, in that you could basically like join a group or something and see when people in your friend group were buying various tokens and whatnot. And I think that was mostly focused on Base, if not exclusively focused on Base and Farcaster people. And so I'm curious, like given those 2 points, maybe those 2 products, and any others that might be relevant from your perspective, what sort of like the hole was that you saw was, worth trying to fill with something different with Checkr? Like what sort of differentiates it versus those, or any other sort of inspirations that tried to, that are out there? Like I've used interface quite a bit. I think it's great, but it's definitely substantially different from Checkr. And so like there's sort of different ways to try to combine social with price and relate the two. And so I'm curious, like your perspective on how Checkr is different, and how you might sort of like aim to continue to make it different by just sort of taking a little bit of a different strategy on this.
Yeah, definitely. Basically, Checkr, what I want to build is the attention layer of Base coins. And what I mean by that is not looking what interface does right now, which is I'm a huge fan since day one. Actually, is the first writing NFT I ever minted, which was when an interface started. And I'm still proud holding that. I love what they do. I met them. I use the product every single day as well. They do combine social with on-chain based on who's transacting or who's minting or what's happening on chain. What I want to do is seeing what's happening on the feed.
Right.
So my focus is basically the attention layer. What I call is I want to know if basically people that are, we have this in crypto a lot, like I'm working for my bags, but are you actually doing it? And if you're doing that, there must be a way to reward you. So if someone posts a lot or creates articles about a token or tokenomics or just shit post a lot, and that makes the price to fluctuate, this person in particular should be rewarded because he drove the attention to the market. So this is where my focus is. It's trying to understand how the feed, kind of the data in the feed flows, and how we can actually identify who are the people that actually drive the engagement and how we can reward these people. So it's more focusing on what's happening on the social layer than not that on-chain layer. I'll say that's the biggest difference.
Yeah, I think like the social layer is one way to describe it. Another one that maybe works for like in my head in particular is like interface is focused, like, because to me interface does feel like it's like sort of showing me the social layer to some extent, but it's a different one. And I think the differentiator for me is like interface is concerned with tracking transactions, whereas you're tracking like content. And so like you said, it's like the feed.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily need, like, it's not, buys and sells and mints and whatnot. It's just posts basically. And those are very much complementary and very much different. You guys aren't doing the rewards piece yet, but you're set up to be able to do that, or sort of on track to be able to do that. Is that right?
Yeah, that's the goal. In a way, what I want to build basically is to, as I mentioned, just to identify, okay, who's the guy that builds all this posts or content, or I don't know, just creates a lot of content or conversations in the feed. And if that somehow I can get to the market, then it should be rewarded for that. Yeah, that's in the plan. I'm trying to see what model works here. So far, I'm doing it. Actually, today is like 3 weeks since I launched, and it's been crazy 3 weeks. So far, it's basically all the metrics on the feed, what's happening. I started also to look some on Twitter data to see what the difference. Actually, in terms of coins, there's so much difference. The conversations happen in Farcaster and Twitter, and I can see why money is on Twitter is not on Farcaster. Even if Farcaster is, for me, is the perfect app to actually talk about money and crypto, because we just earn today like rewards, or people tip each other. You have a wallet integrated. With one click, you're buying something. That's not happening on Twitter. What's happening on Twitter is people do use a lot Banker. So I think last week I spent like a night just tracking Banker replies for specific tokens, and I was amazed. I was like, people are using Banker so much in Twitter compared to Farcaster. Which, if you make a post that it's nice, they will be like, "Hey, Banker, buy me, I know, $10 of this, $5 of this, or 0.18 of this." And I was just amazed, but okay, people are actually looking into this. And if they love that, my biggest question right now is why they don't come to Farcaster, which is much easier, right? You already have everything on the feed. With one click, you can actually buy that. So I think there's a transition period, and I'm kind of trying to also put all the data into. I don't get into our topic now, but putting all the data, because most of the volume that comes to Clunkers based on Farcaster coins comes from Twitter. So if these people are just for the money there must be a way for us to onboard them into Farcaster, because basically it's much easier to do everything. But yeah, maybe they're more into the anonymous phase, and because once you're in Farcaster, kind of you connect your wallet and we see what you do.
Right. So it's interesting, like what you said about the mind share on Twitter versus Farcaster. And I totally agree with everything you said in terms of like, that's what, there's a couple of reasons. Me doing this podcast is sort of, enough of a signal that, I'm pretty bullish on Farcaster and have basically been increasingly, spending time there for up 2.5 years, something like that now. And for all the same reasons you said, it's just a better social, platform for doing things in crypto. It's just like way better.
Yep.
But also, and then the second thing I think, or at least the second main thing, would be just the quality of people and quality of engagement. Even if it wasn't sort of good for all of these crypto things, just the fact that like you can put out a cast and the quality of response, like replies, are going to be so much better than Twitter, even if you have like a lower following. Like, it's not really about the quantity necessarily, but there's just sort of like a different cultural norm of like, you actually can engage thoughtfully with stuff, which I think Twitter is sort of getting further and further away from. It's also, Farcaster sort of remains a little bit more of a text-based platform, I feel like, where Twitter has, all of the traditional socials are sort of converging into some version of like TikTok, where there's more and more videos, more and more short form videos, stuff like that. And I just don't really enjoy that. I mean, I'm like anyone else. I sort of have this natural inclination to click those things and spend time looking at them, unfortunately, but like I don't want to. Like, I want to, read, and ideally read like longer form stuff, or medium form stuff at least. But even just like a plain text tweet is like preferable for me to go through a feed of stuff like that than feed of like these clickbait type videos. So a few reasons, obviously I spent time on Farcaster more, but all that said, you talked about like sort of looking into doing what you're doing with Farcaster, with Checkr, with Twitter as well, and being sort of stunned by the level of banker activity. Can you give an idea of, like what that is like the high level view on Farcaster mindshare? Like, I think I checked today. I think I could be wrong, but like I think DGen might have been like leading mindshare or something like that. And obviously, it's sort of, I think the leading mindshare coins are like a little more familiar on what you would expect if you're on Farcaster. What you would expect to see there is sort of there. But on Twitter, like how was it like completely dominated by banker, or what did that look like?
I didn't check properly my share of all these coins on Twitter. I was just curious to see if people actually are doing something on chain on the social feed, because that's my main point. But basically, Twitter DRB, it's like the one coin that everyone speaks about it. So I'm trying to get into different communities and see what they speak about, and try to understand why they do that. And this one is basically the Dev Relief bot is huge community. Like, they have their own community on Twitter. They post every single day. Every time I made a post about, hey, this is what's happening in Farcaster about this coin, those are the ones that need the most engagement.
Right.
It's in Farcaster is basically our coins, DGen, Brack is every single day. They're in the top 5 because people are really using to play around, and it's really nice to see that. But yeah, it's my goal was just to keep to Farcaster. I will see if I do both Twitter and Farcaster. So far, it's just Farcaster, and my plan is to actually onboard these people into Farcaster. And it already happened. Like, with some people that really reach out on Twitter, they're really curious about why people talk or do not talk about these coins on Farcaster, and they join. And you can see they have like 10 followers or 20 followers, and they reply. And I was like, well, it's amazing. I just built something that I can onboard some people. Most of my target users obviously are traders. I'll try to see how this work. For sure, if I will expand on Twitter, will be much more. I do have a lot of filters for Farcaster, because it's not just mentioning, it's who's talking about that, who's replying to that. And I try to filter out all the bots, and then I also use OpenRank to see the score that every user has. So is there sort of filtering in the mindshare data, like the output of it? On Twitter, I think I should do like 10 times more, because so many bots, so many people just price up, or tagging the coin, or just cash taking around because they want to see farming engagement. That's one of the things I personally didn't want to go there. Like, I want to build on Farcaster, I want to build on open social data. And as you mentioned, like, conversation Farcaster are different level than Twitter. So I'll see how it goes. I do want to check Twitter just to have a personal balance, and to see where kind of the tension layer stay between the both apps. But yeah, I'm also curious to see how that goes.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to focus on Farcaster, at least for a while. But it also makes sense to keep tabs on X, if for no other reason, to see, what the differences are. And like, my sense has been that there's sort of like, Farcaster is so heavily base leaning in terms of like where people transact, at least on Ethereum. Like, obviously people are, some people have like Solana activity as well, but it's like less, they might not have connected their Solana wallet to Farcaster or whatever. So like, most of what you can sort of see going on from Farcaster people is on Ethereum, and most of that, the vast majority, last I checked, like 90% of that is on Base. And so I sort of think of Farcaster as this, circle within the larger circle of Base, and like, maybe there's a tiny slice that sits outside on like the Venn diagram, but the vast majority of Farcaster is sort of like within the larger base circle, and then there's like a sort of what's the rest of that base circle in terms of social. It's, you know, going to be majorities of that's going to be X. And to me, it's like that's still sort of like uncharted territory. Like I don't really feel like I have a good grasp on what's going on there, but I know by just like looking at base coins, there's like all these coins that like I've either never heard of or I have heard of, but like I don't really know anyone who owns them, and they're like way bigger than like Clanker and Banker and Degen and Hire and all these like coins that I know and like, and you know, enjoy the products behind them and or the communities that they have or whatever on Farcaster, like pale, some of them pale in comparison to these other things that I just have like no. I'm like, how do I not know about this, given how it seems like I'm plugged in on base and everyone else on Farcaster that I know like is sort of in the same boat. So it's sort of interesting, I think, to keep tabs on that other piece as well, and just to sort of see, you know, at some point it might make sense to, if I know there's like sort of challenges with the API and whatnot, but you know, at some point it might make sense to sort of expand to that broader part of the circle as well, or hopefully, like you said, the Farcaster circle just sort of like grows within the base circle, and covering Farcaster becomes, you know, a better, like a more meaningful piece of the overall pie over time. I certainly hope that's the case. So another thing I'm sort of curious about is like, you've described like, you know, your career path and whatnot, like never was like sort of overly technical, and like understanding you obviously like leveraged AI quite a bit in building Checkr, but obviously also took a long time and a lot of work. So I'm just curious, like when I think of, you know, what people are calling like vibe coding, I'm like, yeah, you can like sort of build, like for me, I like sort of built my personal website, which is, you know, dead simple, and like took like very little time. And but like I know you can build more than that. You could build like simple games and whatnot, simple apps. But to me, like Checkr feels like it's beyond the scope of what I was familiar with being sort of like doable for like someone who's not really, you know, pretty sophisticated, just sort of using AI to figure out what they're doing. So like, can you talk about like some of the challenges, like how you were able to actually do that, or like maybe you do have some more sort of technical acumen than you let on, or was it truly just like, you know, trying things over and over again until you got it to work? Because like for example, I thought like especially what Checkr does of like sort of having all these different sort of like things talking to each other, like across, you know, ingesting the Farcaster data and like doing all these things was like sort of harder than, you know, if you have like sort of a self-contained app or something. I thought that was relatively doable, but like pulling in all these different things, I thought was kind of like the hard part of if you're going to go that route. So I'm curious like how you actually were able to get it done and how you continue to sort of like iterate with the skills that you do or don't have.
Oh yeah, that was the hardest part. I remember trying Neinar API for the first time and getting data. I was like, okay, this data must be stored somewhere. I didn't know how to store it. I didn't know there's something called caching that you can actually like cache all this data and don't look for like, don't check like 2 weeks back every single time you call the API. It was a mess at the beginning. I remember like reaching out to Rich, like from Neinar. I was like, hey, I'm using this for just vibe coding this weekend. I didn't even call it vibe coding. I didn't know that something that exists out there. I was like, I'm trying to code with AI. And he was like, yeah, you're using the demo APIs. You don't even look at the proper like parameters. So it took a lot of work, but as I mentioned, I'm curious. So I wanted to learn, and I know I just have these drivers, like I want to build this by myself. And I know I just learn. I read about architecture. I read about how to build all these things. I read about how to use the database. I use one. Then I research how to use different ones and see if that's better. I know now I'm using Supabase because it's better in XYZ. And that I changed like 2 weeks ago. I do also like call some friends that I know they're devs, and I just explain the problem. and let's see what kind of the solution. But I don't want to give me the code. I want to learn how to do it, because I really wanted to, from the first day. It's like I want to build something by myself from 0 to 1 and see where I can actually go with it. So every day is a challenge, actually. Today I changed something that took me 4 days, and most probably a day would be less, but I did learn, and now I know how it works. I know how to scale it. First time I launched it, it was all good. I had only 20 tokens, something like that. First day actually was just clunkers, but actually after 1 week, and I saw all the interest I have and demand, the people texting me and people going to the website every single day, I was like, okay, I need to scale this. So I took a weekend just to learn how to scale an app and how to scale a database and how to improve the API. And what I like about also this is Infracaster. Everyone is so helpful. Every time I reach to inner people, they will reply. If I need to use some API from, I spoke with people from Clunker team. I was like, hey, I want to get all this data. Yeah, use Gecko Terminal. This is the API. You should use this parameter. So this is something I really loved, because it's, hey, I have this problem, and they were like, yeah, here's this. Just read this documentation and do it. One thing you should learn if you buy code with APIs is do not do not give the website to, I don't know, Cursor or Cloud or ChatGPT or Windsurf, whatever you use, and just implement this API, because there's no way. You should learn how the API works. You should know how to prompt that. I learned that trying around, and yeah, I think I just got the skill of understanding how everything connects. I think that's also my engineering background is somewhere there for sure. And I just take my iPad and I put try to connect dots and see how it works. And I think that's the way it learns. Also, all the metrics. I love math, so for me it was more I try to build a formula, and I'll just give AI to build the code, and then I'll check the code. I was like, okay, this doesn't work, or one parameter I will put everything should be dynamic because I want to change it based on data I get. So yeah, I think it's just learning by doing, basically, and expanding from that, and also being curious about it. Because if you just want to build a small website or a game and that's it, that's okay. For me, it was more, every time I was building something, I was trying to put down words on, okay, what's the vision of this? Where do you want to go? And with Checkr, I was like, okay, actually, what I want is to build the attention layer for this. So that I know if that will become a protocol in the future, or definitely will become much bigger than one today. So based on that, I tried to, okay, I have this database. Okay, how can I scale it? Will this support 1,000 tokens? No, then I'm not going to this route. So I'm always thinking long term, and then trying to build things small, piece by piece. I think this is I learned with previous projects I was doing. Even if I wasn't a dev, I learned by mistakes. You should have your foundation built first, and then upon that you can just build different Lego pieces. So I'm trying to do that right now.
Right. So on the sort of long-term vision, we sort of talked about earlier, the ambition to eventually make this attention layer something that is useful for presumably the whoever launched the coin, or whether it's company or individual, to basically reward the people who are objectively and measurably driving attention to that coin, to reward them in the currency for for doing so. So a recent example, I think, is like you mentioned DRB earlier. It's pretty good community on or at least passionate community on on X. I see M. Lee Jr. is doing a ton of tweeting and casting about that, and seems to be sort of leading the social element. And so presumably, I guess if in this case it's a little complicated because the dev was, I guess, Grok. But in another case, maybe the creator could sort of reward M. Lee Jr., who's not the creator, for what he's doing. for the coin and for the community. I'm curious if you have thoughts on, like, obviously this seems like something that your previous experience, lends itself well to, having done like the sort of rewards platform with, you mentioned like
Yeah.
soccer clubs and things like that. And so I'm curious if you have sort of thoughts on, I know it's not like an immediate thing, but longer term, like where, how that could work, or just learnings from your prior experience tangential to this. And sort of a related thing is like with, a lot of the coins that are coming up these days are from, Clanker or, whether it's Clanker directly or Clanker via Banker or
Yep.
Zora or Pump Fun, like on Solana. You've got all these different sort of launchers that are all doing the fair launches. And even with something like Higher on Base, with like, his airdrop to the people in the Higher channel, all of these sort of examples don't really give a, there's not like sort of reserves for doing these sorts of things, like, incentivizing people to be active on socials by rewarding them for, their social activity as tracked by Checkr. So I'm curious, like that might be somewhat different from what you had previously done, maybe not, in that some of those, might have been like sort of more sort of custom tokens, not fair launch sort of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm curious if you have sort of thoughts on like sort of the moving nature of the way a lot of tokens are coming out to be, like how that rewards flow could actually potentially work.
Yeah. So what I'm basically thinking about lately is how tokens will become feeds. And what I mean by this, right now, if you check a token, basically you can see, who created it, who's basically like buying or accumulating or selling, but somehow you should know like the whole story, right? It's not showing just price, but capturing basically everything around it: who holds the most, who's driving engagement, who made money, who remix content. This is something in crypto we don't speak a lot, but with splits as a protocol built in, and that's Clanker using it, which is amazing. Actually, Clanker with Banker last week, they released, if you made the post, and if the reply made, hey, create a token using this post, then you get a part of the fees because you were actually the creator of the post, even if you're not the creator of the token. So that was kind of the first move. I was like, okay, this is going into the direction I'm thinking about it, because you will like to track in the future tokens, basically having the whole feed of who's talking about it, who's driving engagement. If you were there, if you remix the content, as I mentioned before, is basically if I'm using your content as a primary and then I make a music NFT, or I can just change the meme or evolve the meme kind of, the previous guy, like, I know, Pepe or something, should get something out of all the remixes that are making it. If I created a coin, let's say in Zora or Clanker, and then I get different derivatives of this coin, I should get somehow part of that revenue that they're making. So how I'm thinking about it is more like every token, you will click on it and you will have like a social feed of everything that happens, social and on-chain also, obviously, but that everything that happened for the first moment, and you will measure the impact that these moments happen. Like if you created a post on day one, like ML Junior, he was like doing this DRB post on Twitter, and that was really good post. And somehow, while you click on it, you will see like who engaged with that, and if they were like, for example, how will work today, as easy as just going to the post and see if people actually use Banker to buy the token. So you will see that this price movement were basically linked to that article, right?
Right.
So that's how I'm thinking, going more into tracking all these moments, getting a kind of, I call it attention score in my mind so far, in paper, whatever ideas, and having this attention score the same way we have like a Farcaster score or the Nena score, in terms of what reach do we have right outside. And this is something I published on Friday, which is the influence impact, like cast impact. Okay, you cast a lot, but do you get enough engagement, and this engagement reach to people or not?
Right.
So this was kind of the first piece I put on the platform to play around and see how the data. So I want to like roll it for the next weeks and see how it goes, and see what, not only the cast, but who made the cast and how that actually impacted other people to create more posts about it. And then if you can translate it to on-chain, then you have kind of the formula for it.
Cool. Well, look, man, I know we're up on time, but really enjoyed this conversation and appreciate you taking the time. And I respect what you're doing, especially like that you decided to do this 0 to 1 on your own. I personally don't really like, not being a technical person myself. I just haven't found the patience to, like, I like to consider myself a curious person as well, but it takes a lot of patience to continue to hit obstacle after obstacle on the technical front and power through them, when for me, like, I just sort of will find a dev to help and focus my energies on other things. But I like I said, I respect and admire the fortitude to take it on your own. And obviously Checkr, it's been a super successful debut. It's been a few weeks now, and it's also held ground. And I think people are, really intrigued by what you're doing for good reason. And I actually, I think most people, I mean, you know better than me, but the like sort of rewards bit, sort of like the second phase of the project, I would, from my perspective, based on what you're saying, like also adds like a whole nother level of intrigue that makes it really interesting. But even just what you've got now with connecting, being the social layer, like you said, connecting the feed to the price movement, it's something that's maybe related to like the interface and whatnot that we talked about previously, but definitely sufficiently different take and useful for its own reasons in ways that I don't think there are really other products out there doing this. So awesome stuff. And we'll look forward to following along with Checkr and everything else that you're doing. But thanks again for the time.
Oh, man, really appreciate the time to chat, and I really enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks. All right. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Likewise. Ciao, ciao.